Hey, Carbon Clarity folks. This month I've got a slightly different show for you. The truth is, with some holidays and various things going on, I haven't been able to record a show with a guest. So instead, I thought I'd do a few book recommendations for you. Before we get on to that though, if you've enjoyed the show in the past or you find this one interesting and useful, please like it, subscribe so you don't miss an episode. Or what would be great is if you could leave a review if you've got a couple of minutes. Okay, let's get on with the books. So first up, we have what I genuinely consider to be a seminal work in climate literature. There Is No Planet B by Mike Berners-Lee. Now, this was the first book I read that looked at climate change and carbon emissions in a truly holistic way. And it absolutely opened my eyes to the sheer breadth of the issues we're facing. And yes, before you ask, he is Tim Berners-Lee's brother. But Mike's carved out his own brilliant path as one of our clearest voices on sustainability and carbon footprinting. I was lucky enough to see Mike speak about this book at a college in Cambridge, and I can tell you his passion and clarity in person matches exactly what you get on the page. My signed copy remains one of my most treasured books, not just because of the signature, but because of how fundamentally it changed my understanding of our environmental challenges. What makes There Is No Planet B absolutely brilliant is that it doesn't just focus on carbon emissions in isolation, which had been my focus for quite some time. Berners-Lee takes this panoramic view, connecting climate, food systems, biodiversity, plastic pollutions, antibiotics, energy, and shows you how it's all interconnected. It's like finally getting the full picture after years of looking at individual puzzle pieces. The genius of this book lies in how Berners-Lee transforms mind-numbing statistics into something you can actually grasp. Instead of drowning you in billions of tons of CO2, which, let's be honest, none of us can really visualize, he breaks everything down into calories, everyday analogies, and practical comparisons that stick in your brain. Take food systems, for instance. He shows that the world produces nearly 6,000 calories of plant-based food per person per day, but humans only need about 2,300. So it sounds like we've got it sorted, right? But then he walks you through where all those calories actually go, to livestock, to waste, to inefficiency. And suddenly you understand why our food system is such a climate disaster without needing a PhD in agricultural science. What I absolutely love about Berners-Lee's approach is that he strikes a great balance between not talking down to you, but also not assuming you're an expert. He's created this handbook that works whether you're completely new to climate issues or whether you've been thinking about this stuff for years. The writing is warm, it's accessible, it's often surprisingly funny, which is no mean feat when you're dealing with a potentially apocalyptic subject. The book tackles all the questions we're actually asking. So do we all need to become a vegetarian? How can we possibly fly in a low carbon world? What about fracking? And crucially, given these global challenges, what on earth can an individual actually do about it? The updated edition, which is one I've got published in 2021, adds even more value with new material on those protests that we had around Extinction Rebellion and the lessons from the pandemic, wildfires, investment strategies, and so on. It still feels incredibly relevant whilst remaining grounded in solid, timeless principles. This isn't just an academic exercise, incidentally. Berners-Lee gives you an intuitive feel for impact that actually changes how you make decisions. You won't come away with precise calculations for every choice, that's for sure, but you will have developed this internal compass that helps you navigate the climate implications of your daily life. Should I drive or take the train? What about that flight to see family? Or how much does my diet really matter? The book doesn't give you rigid rules for those things, but it gives you the framework to think about them properly. What struck me probably the most powerfully when I first read it was the sheer breadth of interconnected issues. Climate change isn't just about renewable energy. It's about how we grow food, how we design cities, how we think about population, how we manage resources, how we structure our economy. Berners-Lee helps you see these connections without getting lost in the complexity. In our current moment with climate anxiety at an all-time high and everyone feeling overwhelmed by the scale of the challenges, if you think about it at all, this book is like having a knowledgeable, reassuring friend who can help you make sense of it all. It's simultaneously sobering about the reality of our situation and genuinely helpful about what we can do about it. So, There Is No Planet B remains, in my opinion, one of the best entry points into understanding our environmental challenges holistically. Whether you're just starting to think seriously about climate issues or you're looking for a book that ties together all the threads you've been following separately, this is essential reading. Mike Berners-Lee has created something rare, a book that's both intellectually rigorous and completely accessible, but comprehensive and practical, honest about our problems and optimistic about solutions. If you're going to read one book about climate change and sustainability, make it this one. And, I've no idea if Mike is still doing talks, but who knows? Maybe you'll be lucky enough to get your copy signed too. So that's There Is No Planet B by Mike Berners-Lee. Grab yourself the updated edition if you can. And if you do, I'd love to hear what you think of it. Next up, we have a book that really made me rethink my understanding of the natural world. Entangled Life by Merlin Sheldrake. I read the audiobook, so I haven't got the physical copy here. Now, I'll be honest, my camera roll is full of photos of fungi. I've been fascinated by them for years. Their incredible diversity, those mind-boggling symbiotic relationships. But this book, this took that fascination and cranked it up to 11. If you've ever walked through some woods and thought you were looking at individual trees in their separate lives, prepare to have your mind completely rewired. Picture this. Beneath your feet right now, there's an internet. Not our internet, something far more sophisticated, far older, and absolutely essential to life as we know it. Sheldrake calls it the Wood Wide Web, and it's run entirely by fungi. We're talking about networks that can span entire continents, connecting plants, sharing resources, and communicating in ways that make our most advanced technology look pretty primitive. What Sheldrake does brilliantly in Entangled Life is challenge this very Western notion that we're all independent actors in the world. You know, the idea that you're you, I'm me, that tree is that tree, all separate and self-contained. Complete rubbish, according to the fungi. Take mycorrhizal networks, fungal partnerships with the roots of plants. We're not just talking about a bit of mutual back scratching here. These networks are literally sharing carbon, nitrogen, phosphorus between plants. A Douglas fir can be connected to hundreds of other plants through a single fungal network. When a plant's dying, it actually sends resources through the network to its neighbours. It's like the ultimate act of community solidarity happening silently beneath our feet every single day. But here's where it gets really mind-bending. And this was my biggest takeaway. Sheldrake forces you to question what we even mean by individual. Are you really just you? Well, your body is absolutely teeming with fungi and bacteria. They're not just along for the ride. They're actively shaping your mood, your immune system, even your behavior. The fungi in your gut having conversations with your brain that you're not even aware of. This really hit home for me because it connects so beautifully with everything we discuss on Carbon Clarity about interconnectedness in nature, climate change, biodiversity loss. These aren't separate issues affecting separate species. We're all part of this incredibly ancient web of relationships. Damage one part and the ripples spread everywhere. So Sheldrake takes you on this journey from the microscopic to the massive. One moment you're learning about how fungi can actually steer the behavior of insects, literally turning ants into zombies to spread their spores. And the next you're discovering how entire ecosystems depend on these fungal networks to function. Now, I did find the pacing a little uneven in places. Some sections absolutely fly by with revelation after revelation, whilst others do feel like they could use a bit more momentum. And if you're going to go for the audiobook like I did, which I'd actually recommend because Sheldrake's passion really comes through with that, you might want to bump up that playback speed. Delivery is beautifully measured, but perhaps a touch too leisurely for modern attention spans. Maybe that's deliberate. There's also the occasional bit of repetition, though honestly, given how mind-blowing some of these concepts are, a bit of reinforcement doesn't go amiss. But here's why this book is absolutely essential reading for anybody interested in sustainability. It fundamentally changes how you think about solutions. When you understand that forests are collaborative networks rather than competitive individuals, suddenly approaches like rewilding and ecosystem restoration make even more sense. Sheldrake isn't just writing about fungi, he's writing about a completely different way of understanding life itself, one that's collaborative, interconnected, and frankly far more hopeful than our usual stories about nature being red in tooth and claw. Entangled Life is one of those books that genuinely changes how you see the world. Next time you're in a forest, you'll know you're not just looking at trees, you're looking at the visible tips of an ancient collaborative network that's been perfecting sustainability for a very long time. If you're interested in fungi, fascinated by nature, or just want your mind thoroughly and delightfully blown, this book absolutely deserves a place on your reading list. Trust me, you'll never look at mushrooms or anything else in nature quite the same way again. So that's Entangled Life by Merlin Sheldrake. Have you read it? If you have, I'd love to hear what you thought of it. Next up is Regenesis by George Monbiot. And I'll be honest with you right from the start, Monbiot is one of those writers who divides opinion. You might love his newspaper columns or you might find them infuriating. Or like me, you might agree with most of what he says, but maybe not everything. But here's the thing. Put aside whatever preconceptions you might have about Monbiot because Regenesis showcases his investigative journalistic chops at its absolute best. This book completely changed how I think about one fundamental issue. Space. Not outer space, agricultural space. My single biggest takeaway from Regenesis was this realization that the most damaging aspect of our current agricultural system might not be the pesticides or the fertilizers or even the greenhouse gas emissions. It's simply how much room farming takes up on our planet. And when you start thinking about that properly, it changes everything. What makes Regenesis so compelling is that you can see Monbiot's journalistic rigour really coming to the fore. This is meticulously researched, brilliantly structured, and hangs together as this utterly convincing narrative about why our global food system is doing more harm than good, both locally and on a planetary scale. He takes you on this journey from soil science to global trade patterns, from ecological devastation of intensive farming to the social and economic impacts that keep it all locked in place. It's investigative journalism applied to one of humanity's most fundamental challenges. Let me give you a sense of what I mean about space. So Monbiot shows how agriculture already uses about half the world's habitable land. Half, about 44%, I think, by the latest data. And as our population grows and diets become more resource intensive, we're looking at needing even more. But here's the kicker. Most of that land isn't even feeding people efficiently. Vast swathes are given over to growing crops to feed livestock, or producing luxury exports for wealthy countries whilst local populations go hungry. When you understand the sheer scale of this land use, suddenly all these other environmental problems start making sense. Deforestation, largely driven by agriculture. Biodiversity loss, habitat destruction for farming. Water scarcity, agriculture and irrigation. Climate change, well, agriculture and land use change account for about a quarter of global emissions. What Monbiot does brilliantly is weave all these threads together into a coherent story. He's not just throwing stats at you, although there's plenty of those. He's building this case piece by piece about how our food system has become this monster that's devouring the planet, whilst often failing to nourish people, the people it's supposed to serve. He takes you to farms in Wales, to the Amazon rainforest, to research labs, always connecting the local impacts to the global picture. You start to see how a sheep farm in the Welsh Hills connects to deforestation in Brazil, how our obsession with meat connects to water shortages in California, how our global trade in animal feed connects to the collapse of marine ecosystems. Now, I should mention there are moments where Monbiot does sort of lapse into conjecture, particularly when he's imagining potential solutions. He talks about precision fermentation, about rewilding vast areas of agricultural land, about completely reimagining how we produce protein. Some of this feels a bit speculative, a bit what if rather than here's how. But actually, I think that's rather the point. The answers to our food system crisis aren't all out there yet. If they were, someone with Monbiot's investigative skills would have found them. And we do need to imagine solutions before we can develop them. Sometimes conjecture is exactly what we need to push boundaries and inspire that innovation that we need. That you might not agree with all of Monbiot's conclusions. You might think he's too harsh on farmers or too optimistic about technological solutions. But what you can't argue with is the quality of his research and the power of his analysis of the problems we're facing. For anyone interested in sustainability, this book is essential reading because it forces you to think about food systems as an environmental system. Every meal you eat has this enormous invisible footprint stretching across the planet. Every agricultural policy decision ripples through ecosystems worldwide. And crucially, Monbiot makes the case that we can't solve climate change, biodiversity loss or environmental degradation without fundamentally rethinking how we produce food. It's not enough to kind of tweak around the edges. We need systemic change. So despite dealing with complex global systems, Monbiot keeps the writing accessible and engaging. He has his gift for taking scientific research and economic data and making it feel urgent and personal. You're not just reading about abstract environmental problems, you're learning how they connect to your daily life and the future of the planet. Regenesis is George Monbiot at his most compelling, rigorous, challenging and absolutely essential. Even if you disagree with his politics or find his newspaper writing provocative, this book deserves your attention. It might just change how you think about every meal you eat and every piece of land you see. Whether you're interested in environmental issues or food policy, or just want to understand one of the biggest challenges facing humanity, Regenesis should be on your reading list. Just don't expect to look at agriculture or your lunch quite the same way again. So, that's Regenesis by George Monbiot. Have you read it? I'd be fascinated to hear your thoughts, especially if you find yourself disagreeing with his conclusions. So, there you go. 3 great books for you to read that will change the way you think. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and if you have a minute, maybe leave a review. Until next time.